On today's episode, we take a look at 3 brand new baits that just hit store shelves, along with our personal on-the-water experience with each. We have some interesting industry news involving a few major tackle retailers. One of the young guns in pro fishing wins $500,000 in a no live scope tournament, and more on today's episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. We have a great show for you guys today, but before we get started, again, we have to give a big thank you to the folks that make this entire podcast possible, American Legacy Fishing. They are great folks. Brian, the whole gang over at ALF is first class all the way. We've worked with them for years. They are amazing. Again, they provide us with the opportunity to produce this show. We wouldn't be able to do it without the people at American Legacy Fishing, so go support them. You can go check them out over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, you can use code TACKLETALK5 for an extra 5% off. All right, the first bit of news that we have here on the show today in the fishing world comes to us from the Minnesota Star Tribune, featuring 2 pretty well-known fishing retailer brands, Omnia Fishing and Thorne Brothers. And the article is titled, 2 Minnesota Fishing Businesses Join Forces to Expand Their Specialties. And the subheadline here says, Omnia will concentrate on its lakes and databases, while Thorne Brothers hopes to triple digital growth through the deal. Now, I'm going to skip around here and only read the parts I think that are important to us, but the article here says, a new partnership between Omnia, a fishing app, and legendary Blaine fishing shop Thorne Brothers aims to solve a problem for both partners. By handing off fulfillment and inventory management of fishing products to Thorne, fast-growing Omnia will be able to focus on growing its subscription service and improving its app. And Thorne will be able to triple its e-commerce sales, an area of needed growth for the retailer. Terms of the deal were not disclosed, but Omnia sold its inventory of more than 25,000 fishing-related items to Thorne and closed its 30,000 square foot warehouse in Golden Valley. Omnia has developed a rich database of information on lakes across the country. Its online site and app can recommend the fishing gear that would be best for the given location. The company, founded in 2018, had received $2.1 million in venture capital funding by 2021. Since then, it has secured between $8 million and $13 million more in investments. Selling the inventory will allow the company to concentrate on app development and selling more digital subscriptions to its information. Anglers like to touch physical things, so they're not easy to sell subscriptions to, said Matt Johnson, CEO of Omnia, but we're a venture-funded business. We have to position appropriately. Without inventory to manage, Omnia will move to a smaller office space and concentrate on the tech and the digital subscription business that carries higher margins. The company currently has about 15,000 subscribers. Okay, so this article says in kind of a roundabout way that Thorne Brothers and Omnia Fishing are now basically codependent on each other. They seemingly are no longer 2 completely separate entities with their own inventory and back-of-house and software. It seems like, anyway, that Omnia has closed their entire warehouse. They sold all of their inventory to Thorne Brothers, who are a very popular kind of local retailer up there in the northern Midwest. They do a lot more than just bass, I know, too. From what I know about Thorne Brothers, I was introduced to them through the muskie world. They're very big in the muskie world in particular. And I guess this means that Thorne Brothers is getting way more online traffic because they'll be getting a piece of all of the Omnia online sales. And then Omnia can get out of the fulfillment business completely and focus on what we've all kind of known in the back of our minds for a long time, is that Omnia is really a tech company. They just used fishing gear as a vessel, but they've always been more of like a tech startup type feel with data capture and subscriptions and app technology, that type of company. And that was always a little bit of a disconnect for me with Omnia, is that you could clearly see that that's the lane they wanted to be in. I mean, they've taken on a ton of venture capital money. It sounds like, I mean, we're talking I don't know what that was. I mean, 8 to 13 million since 2021, 2 million before 2021. So all of that money to kind of get their tech to where it is today. And then in order to be a profitable company or to make some sort of additional revenue, I guess, they had to use that tech to sell fishing gear. Well, now they've found a way to have somebody else handle the fishing gear side of things so that they almost work, I'm guessing anyway, more as like an affiliate than a retailer themselves. Like Omnia is almost going to become a Wired to Fish or a YouTuber where they're using their tech or their content to recommend fishing gear, and then they push your sale to someone else to fulfill that order, like Thorne Brothers. That's not really that much different than if, you or I were a pro staffer and we had an affiliate link where we're trying to get people to order product X through our affiliate link, and then when it gets fulfilled by somebody else, we get a commission for it. That seems to be where Omnia is kind of going. But again, this is just some news that many of you might not have heard of or might not be aware of yet. If you do shop at Omnia, there were some interesting changes recently where it looks like they are now sort of directly tied to another company, Thorne Brothers, for their product distribution from here on out. So good on both of them, I guess. If that's the space that both companies want to be in, Thorne on the actual product sales side and distribution and shipping and all that kind of stuff, and then Omnia on the tech, then that's great, I guess. I'd rather see fishing companies find creative solutions to stay in business than go belly up all day long every day. So competition is a good thing in fishing, and the fact that both of these companies seem to have kind of found a solution to their problems should be a good thing all around. Okay, the next bit of news here we have on the show today before we move on is we have to give a big shout out to Tucker Smith, who is your reigning 2025 Bassmaster Rookie of the Year. He's an Elite Series champion in his first year on tour, the phenom that won in college. I think he won in high school. He won the U.S. Open a few years back that was like a $1 million prize with his partner Logan Parks. And now he won the Ultimate Angler Championship at Lake Guntersville this month, which boasted a whopping $500,000 for first place. And even better, the young gun silenced a lot of the peanut gallery online who always categorize a lot of these younger guys as too reliant on new technology, or they call them scopers or whatever, because this tournament was a no live sonar tournament. Now, here's a little bit of a snippet of an article from Outdoor Alabama. It says, Smith said that his main bait for the Ultimate Angler Championship was a 3/4 ounce tungsten Picasso football jig with a Yamamoto Yamacraw trailer in green pumpkin. That's my go-to, he said. I was fishing the edges of the grass. I was fishing shell banks and rocks, any hard spot next to grass where those fish could pull up and chill out and then move back into the grass at night. Being on my home lake this week and having fun, that's what I did this week. I fished hard and I did it without live scope. A lot of people have been saying that the younger fishermen can't catch anything without live scope. I think I proved us young guys can still catch them without live scope. So yeah, he won $500,000 on a football jig and a craw trailer, dragging weed edges and hard bottom areas against the best anglers in the country. I mean, what more do you want from the kid? So congratulations to Tucker. I've had the pleasure of meeting Tucker a few times. We've had him on the show before. He's a great kid. His idol was Aaron Martens, and you can tell when you watch him fish, the way that he fishes, the way that he carries himself. I mean, I'll be honest, I think pretty highly of Tucker, and I'm excited that he got this moment to kind of put a little egg on the faces of the people who unfairly label him and a lot of the other younger anglers as sort of one-trick ponies versus respecting them for the well-rounded, dominant anglers that they are. Huge congratulations, big hat tip to Tucker Smith, who is now $500,000 richer. All right, let's move on to the next thing we have here on the show today, and that is more new baits. Yep. This is Tackle Talk. You tuned in to a podcast called Tackle Talk. We are going to talk tackle. And we have more brand new baits hitting the shelf this week from Berkley. So I just want to say really quickly, because if it sounds like the past couple weeks we've been hitting Berkley baits a lot, it's because, well, we have, because they're one of the only big brands that's actually rolling out a lot of new baits right now. Most baits roll out from a lot of the big brands around July and ICAST time, so there is this giant boom of new bait talk and new bait news, and then it's just over all at once. Well, Berkley this year decided not to attend ICAST, and they decided to roll these new baits out in the fall. So that's why the last few weeks there's been some new Berkley bait talk. And honestly, I wish more companies would do at least a little bit of this so that we have some fun new gear to talk about throughout the year, not just one giant drop of new bait news all at once in July. And I say that as someone who really enjoys going to ICAST every year, and I love that whole sort of like pomp and circumstance in the fishing world, and at least kind of forcing people to put their best foot forward for like 3 or 4 days. I really do enjoy that. But if you're a brand and you have like 5 new baits coming out in 2026, why not release like 3 or 4 of them at ICAST and then save a couple for later in the year? I know there's this sort of fear of being overshadowed in July, and that can definitely happen, right? If you don't release anything or you don't have a big splash in July, every other brand is being talked about and your brand is not. I understand that there's a little bit of like FOMO there, but if you look at the long term, I think you'll probably get a lot more attention on your baits if you can hold off and release them kind of on your own schedule. At least not doing that with 100% of your baits, right? Don't release 100% of your baits at ICAST. I think more people should do what, Berkley and Pure Fishing and those type of people did this year. I think that would be cool to see. There's probably a happy medium in there somewhere, and I think some brands are starting to take notice of that. But as of today, Tuesday, October 21st, the final 3 new Berkley baits are okay for us to talk about. So let's jump in here. I would say we probably have one that I'm very excited about, one that I'm mildly excited about, and one that's a little out of my wheelhouse. So let's start with the big one, the one that I'm very excited about. And this is a bait called the Chop Block. Now, this, in my opinion, is the best bait out of the 5 total, 2 a few weeks ago, 3 today, that we're going to discuss from Berkley. This Chop Block is basically a traditional glide bait version of the Berkley Nessie that came out maybe a year or 2 ago at this point. So it is this sort of completely soft body glide bait. Now, the Nessie was more along the lines of like a skinny herring style glide bait, like the JDM Grow Design Works flag, like that type of thing. Just a skinny, long, single joint glide bait, but its hook position and its hook placement was a lot more along the lines of a mag draft style bait, more of like a single treble harnessed somewhere under the belly. And on the Nessie and the Call Shad, that's a clip that actually keeps that treble there. On the mag draft, it's obviously a magnet. There's a lot of other baits out there that utilize magnets, but that style of sort of single hook harnessed swim bait. This, the Chop Block, is like a hybrid between that and then a traditional 2-treble glide bait. So this Chop Block features one large treble hook that clips back just like a Call Shad or the Nessie does, but then attached to that treble hook is another sort of like dual hook stinger hook attached with a kind of stringy cord harness deal, and then that back dual hook is secured by a very strong magnet that is right there on the bottom half of the tail portion of the body, kind of toward the back. So what you end up getting is 2 hooks, and they're placed in the areas that you would want them on a regular glide bait. 1 hook on the front half, 1 hook on the back half, but they're tucked up. So again, more like a mag draft or a Call Shad would be, and I think it's pretty darn cool. Now, I will admit I'm not the most up to speed on really obscure, JDM baits or whatever, but I personally have never seen a harness exactly like this before. You've seen some things from Raid and stuff that kind of get close, but this is a spin on that sort of tucked up dual hook system that I've never seen before. And I think, and from what I've used of it so far, I do really like it. I think it's a cool design. Now, the other thing that this bait has going for it is, unlike that sort of herring style body of the Nessie, this is a true gizzard shad profile. So you've got a fatter, taller, more sort of like football shaped, which is what I want around here where I fish. I want gizzard shad profiles. I don't really need herring profiles. I mean, yes, they work, they still catch fish, but if you want to kind of match what we have around here, it's gizzard all day long. So this bait gives you that different profile that a lot of you gizzard and big shad lake guys are looking for. So it's got the profile that I want. It's got a much better hook system. It comes in 3 sizes. You've got a 6-inch, an 8-inch, and a 10-inch, and I've had the chance to fish these pretty hard over the past month or so, and after playing around with them, I like the 8-inch the best. It's sort of like a Goldilocks situation for me, right? The 6-inch is just a little too small. It can be a little too temperamental sometimes. The 10-inch is too big for most of my situations around here. The 8-inch is just right. So your weights and prices on these, the 6-inch is going to be 1 ounce, and it's going to be priced at $15.99. The 8-inch is 2.2 ounces, and it's priced at $24.99. And the 10-inch is 4.2 ounces, priced at $29.99. Now, you'll notice those weights are much heavier than their Nessie counterparts, and then the prices are higher as well. So this is a completely different bait. This is not just a different shaped Nessie. This bait is a lot more like a traditional glide bait substitute versus something like the Nessie or a flag or something like that. Now, the one thing I'll say is that when you're fishing them, they don't feel as heavy as the package says. That is what they weigh, but I'm talking like on the cast and things like that. When I saw 2.2 ounces for the 8-inch, which is pretty close to the length of the 7-inch resin baits that I throw a lot that are 2 ounces, I think on the cast, the 2.2 ounce chop block feels lighter than my 2-ounce resin bait. I don't know why, I don't know how to explain it, but when casting a 2-ounce resin bait and then switching over to that 2.2 ounce chop block and going really A versus B back and forth, the chop block doesn't feel as heavy. So I say that because don't let the weight on the package scare you away or think that your rod can't handle it or things like that. Yes, you need a, somewhat beefy rod, but it's not like this thing is casting a brick. This thing casts very well for its listed weight. Now, I've been fishing these, like I said, for a couple weeks now, probably the better part of a month, and I've put them through the ringer, and a couple things that I've noticed about these chop blocks. One, I have had 0 issues with that back hook falling off of the magnet or the front hook falling off the clip. None. Now, I lean toward the camp of actually liking clips better than magnets, so when I saw that this had a magnet in the back, I was a little skeptical, but you have to give credit where credit is due. That magnet on that tail is bigger and stronger than almost any magnet that I have ever used in a bait up to this point. This isn't some sort of tiny 3mm wussy megabass magnet buried in soft plastic. This has more surface area. It's stronger. It's metal to metal contact. So I have had 0 issues there. I thought that was pretty cool. Number 2, it's surprisingly consistent in its action. Now, is it as consistent as a resin bait? No, it's not, but I don't think any soft plastic glide bait is ever going to be as consistent as a resin bait. That's just my opinion, but darn it if this bait doesn't come pretty dang close for a soft plastic alternative. And the third point I want to make here, and this is probably my favorite one, I really think this bait can be the glide bait fisherman's answer to having a great follow-up bait ready to go. When you're fishing a glide and you finally get those fish to commit to the glide bait, but they miss it, in the right situation, you might get another shot at that fish. You might not. A big, distinct resin glide bait can often be like a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me type deal for fish, I think. But I have had multiple situations where I have thrown a regular resin glide bait. I've had a fish try to eat it, but either not get completely hooked or shake it really fast, and then thrown back in there with that same resin bait and had no luck, no takers on the follow-up. But then I threw the chop block back in there and got bit again. And it wasn't a fluke because it happened, I can think right off the top of my head, at least 3 or 4 different times. And I really think what it comes down to is the fact that as consistent and attractive as a big resin glide bait is, it's also very recognizable and not that natural. It's big, it's bulky, it's hard, it's rigid, it's got big, shiny, loud, dangling treble hooks off the bottom of it. It's got a loud, squeaky or vibrating joint in the middle when it moves. It's just not the most kind of subtle, covert bait out there for sure. Meanwhile, something like the chop block eliminates a lot of those issues. It's actually soft, so if that fish does get kind of like a feel of it, it feels and looks more natural, more like a regular shad than a big hunkin', piece of resin or something. It's more of a matte, soft plastic finish on the outside. It's got no dangling hooks that are making noise or swiveling or reflecting light as they jangle back and forth because those hooks hooks are concealed pretty well. There's no loud metal on metal or resin on resin joint in the middle of that bait as it goes through the water, so there's no clacking. It's completely silent, and I think that has a lot to do with its ability to be a pretty dangerous follow-up bait, setting aside, obviously, its ability to be a good primary bait in general. So that's my sneaky advice, and this is one of those things I hadn't heard really mentioned at all, and I even messaged Berkley because I thought that I had figured something out with this bait, so I wrote them and I said, hey, I think you might have a winner here as a cool follow-up glide bait based on what I've seen when I've been using it. So that's my real winner in the Berkley new baits this fall, the Chop Block. And then on the flip side of the coin, there are baits that I think are okay or aren't my favorite of the 5 new baits, and that's just going to be how it goes, right? If you have strong opinions, you're going to have things that you love and things that you are indifferent about, and then things that you don't really like. So that brings us to our next new bait from Berkley, and that's the Screamin' Chapo. Now, this is along the same lines as that Riveter buzzbait we talked about a few weeks ago, which I would probably call my number 2 favorite bait out of these 5, that buzzbait. But this Screamin' Chapo is going to go below that buzzbait for me. And you guys know I'm a Chapo truther, I would say, right? I have probably bought 5 times more Berkley Chapos in the past, whatever it is, 3 years than I have Whopper Ploppers or any other prop bait. I think price-wise, performance-wise, they're just my go-to prop bait at this point. So they've now come out with the Screamin' Chapo, which is basically a Chapo with a new sound. Remember when we said that Berkley was focusing on sound a couple weeks ago and that was going to be a big thing over the coming years, and we talked to them when we were down in Houston and all that kind of stuff? This is another example of that right here. And when you fish this bait, it's got that metally squeak that you would expect from something called the Screaming Chapo. Now, that part I'm cool with, right? There are situations where I want more noise. I want more drawing power, especially in choppy water, in windy conditions, in dirty water. If you're around a lot of flow, sure, give me noise. I like options. I think that is a good thing. But this space has also become kind of crowded in the past year for loud ploppers. Rapala came out with the Claptail, Strike King came out with the Clickin' Chicken, and now the Screamin' Chapo from Berkley. So we have a lot of competition in this space for a different sounding prop bait. Now let's get to our experience on the water with this bait. The first thing that I noticed when I fished this bait is that the Screamin' Chapo is heavier than the original Chapo. There is a noticeable weight difference when you cast this bait. Now, I haven't seen anything that says that they're heavier, but I can tell you when I was casting these, you can't convince me that the new Screamin' Chapo isn't heavier than the old Chapo for the size. So I went digging, I went to look it up, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy because the sizes don't actually line up perfectly to compare weights on A versus B, regular Chapo versus Screamin' Chapo. But the regular Chapo, the original versions, come in 4 sizes. You've got a 75 size, a 90, a 105, and a 120. So your sizes in inches there, I guess, would be 3 inches, 3 2/7 inches, 4 1/8 inches, and 4.5 inches. So those sizes, the 75 size weighs half an ounce, the 90 size weighs half an ounce as well, the 105 weighs 3/4 of an ounce, and the 120 weighs 1 ounce. Those are all the specs for the regular Chapos. Now, the new Screamin' Chapo only comes in 2 sizes. It comes in 95 and 110. And you will notice those are 2 new sizes that are kind of in between the existing sizes of the old Chapos. The old Chapos come in a 90 and a 105 for like the closest size, I guess. The Screamin' Chapo comes in 95 and 110. So you can't really compare sizes to see what weighs the same, but we do have baits that weigh the same, and we can kind of do the reverse and see what their size is. So if you'll remember back, the 105 size regular Chapo weighed 3/4 of an ounce. The smallest Screamin' Chapo they came out with is a 95 that also weighs 3/4 of an ounce. So you have a 105 in the old Chapo that weighs 3/4, and a new 95, a smaller length that also weighs 3/4. And then you can go do the same thing with the 110 size Screamin' Chapo at 1 ounce and the 120 regular regular size Chapo at 1 ounce. So what that tells me is that the Screaming Chapos are heavier for their size. That can be confirmed just trying to reverse compare both of these different baits. Now, as far as the bait itself goes, it's fine, right? It's a Chapo that squeaks. That's what you're getting. You know what you're getting right out of the box. They're not hiding the ball here. This is an extension of a very popular existing bait. Now, the interesting part is that it has sort of a similar sound profile to that Riveter buzzbait that we talked about a few weeks ago. So I do think that is cool because it sort of seems like they're trying to build almost like a signature sound. This thin squeak that mimics those really good kind of worn out buzz baits of old, replicating that pretty well across multiple baits, I think is an interesting concept. Now, you guys also know how we do things around here. We talk about the good, we also talk about the bad. Truly honest takes and reviews. That's what we're trying to do here. And I saw some comments from some of the Berkley anglers or people that seem to be affiliated with Berkley a little bit that were claiming that this bait had a better tail design so that it doesn't roll, and they had sort of fixed the rolling issue. I haven't heard that from Berkley themselves, but I heard people saying that online. Now, I just want to kind of set the record straight here. That is not true. I don't know if they were joking. I don't know if they were just saying what they heard or what, but anyone that tells you that these new Screaming Chapos do not roll is just wrong. This Screaming Chapo, just like any other Chapo or Whopper Plopper or any other prop bait style in general for the most part, especially your smaller sizes, is going to roll. That just seems to come with the territory of this style of bait. Trust me, I have spent plenty of time with this Screaming Chapo out there for 2 or 3 weeks now. It rolls just like all the others do. So if you are buying this thinking that it is the magic fix for the dreaded body roll of a prop bait, I don't think that this is going to be your answer. But at slow speeds, because of probably that extra weight that I'm guessing, it might roll less in certain situations. I'll maybe concede that. But if you burn this or you toss it in current or you alternate your speeds a lot, you're going to get that body roll. They all do it. This one is no different. It is not a problem with this bait. It is just a nature of the type of bait that it is. Every single one that I've ever used will roll from time to time. So overall, I'm just kind of meh on this one, right? I'd probably give it like a B-. It works. It catches fish. I caught plenty of fish with it when I was out there using it. There are some sneaky uses for this bait. Like if you need just a little bit more casting distance because it is heavier, you can get that little extra casting distance. It's louder, so you can help draw attention from farther away. If you're looking for that type of stuff, give it a go. But I happen to be on the side of I like the sort of silent, thin plop of that regular Chapo, and I think 95% of the time, that's still going to be the direction that I go with my Chapo choice from here on out. Okay, that is bait number 2, and now it is time for bait number 3. And this one is going to be probably my least applicable to me, least favorite of the 3 we'll talk about today, but it's more about the way that I fish than the effectiveness of this bait, I guess. But this bait itself is the triple minnow rig. Now, the triple minnow rig is a very interesting concept, I'll give them that, but I'll kind of let the mid-strolling and live scope guys kind of decide if this is going to be a big player in the future or not. But the general idea is you've got sort of your main line with your jig head minnow, and this triple minnow rig is a clear harness piece that kind of slides onto your line before you tie on your main jig head minnow, similar to, how you would put on like a peg or a bobber stop or something before you actually tie on your main bait. And then that harness has 2 long pieces of what look like fluorocarbon that stick off of each side, one on the right side, one on the left side, and each of those arms has a teaser minnow on it. So you're kind of making a jig head minnow A-rig sort of hybrid presentation that allows you to maintain that tension and your feel of that single jig head minnow on the bottom of your rig with the additional attraction of 2 separate sort of teaser minnows without hooks on them, one on either side. Now, I'll be honest, I did not fish this one much because, again, this is just not the type of fishing that I do a lot, especially this time of year. But my initial concern would just be hookup rate, because unlike an A-rig where you've got 3 or 5 individual minnows, but they're pretty close together in a bait ball and moving so fast that the fish just sort of attacks the whole thing and then gets hooked by one of them, this is a slower finesse presentation where the targets are pretty far apart from each other still, and 2/3 of those targets don't have a hook. So I won't spend a ton of time, I guess, going on the ins and outs of this bait because it's just so far out of my wheelhouse, but I will chalk this one up to cool idea, effectiveness, and efficiency is kind of yet to be seen. So there are your 3 final brand new baits from Berkley in 2025, the Berkley Chop Block, the Berkley Screaming Chopo, and the Berkley Triple Minnow Rig. And when you add in the Flux Gill and the Riveter Buzzbait from a few weeks ago, that gives you your full new 5-bait lineup from Berkley. So I guess if I had to rank these in terms of which ones I liked best after using them all, I would say my top choice is the Chop Block. I would say my second choice would be the Riveter Buzzbait. I would give 3rd place to the Flux Gill. I would go 4th place, the Screaming Chopo, and then 5th place, that Triple Minnow Rig. So there you go. Some new bait talk for all of you fellow tackle nerds out there from Berkley. All right, that wraps us up pretty nicely here today, folks. Next week, you're going to want to tune in because we have another one of those science episodes that is going to be so much fun. This is one of my favorite science, researcher type episodes that we've done in quite a while. A great guest. He's very good in terms of being able to explain everything. He's been a part of some really cool studies and some really cool ongoing research. So I'm very excited for this one. We recorded it last week. I'm getting ready to go back through and edit it. But it is going to be one of those conversations, I think, where you guys are going to get the chance to listen to that and go, darn it, that was a pretty cool, pretty useful hour in terms of the information that I got and some things that might shake up your approach and how you think about certain things out there on the water. I really enjoyed that one. Stay tuned for that next week. But as always, you can find us on tackletalkpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the whole deal at Tackle Talk Podcast. And we will see you guys right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.